Your name and spelling and your title here at the zoo.
Okay. I'm Colleen Stice, S-T-I-C-E. I'm a physician, plastic surgeon in Omaha, and I'm just a volunteer at the zoo.
So how did you get involved in this project, I guess you'd call it?
A little bit of a long story. My husband is a docent for the raptor recovery program in Nebraska. He's a master naturalist and also on the board of the Audubon Society, so he has an interest in raptors. And this eagle was brought to the raptor recovery program. Two fishermen found him, and he wasn't in very good shape. He had this black scab on the top of his head. So they brought him to raptor recovery, and no one could figure out what the injury was due to. The eagle was not in good shape. And so the raptor recovery people took pictures of him, shared those pictures around to all the various raptor recovery programs in the United States, and no one knew what that injury was due to. So my husband showed me the injury, and it's a classic electrical burn appearance where you have all of the soft tissue and some of the bone electrocuted off with the energy from touching a high voltage wire of some kind. And it just blew off all of the top of his head, feathers and soft tissue and the top two layers of bone. So you had these little spicules of trabeculae of bone sticking out that were black and charred. So I went down to raptor recovery in Elmwood, Nebraska, and took a look at the bird. It was much better by then. They had resuscitated him. And we decided that we'd contact the zoo to see if Dr. Schrader and Dr. Armstrong could provide us with equipment so that we could take off this scab. And that was arranged. Dr. Schrader was in the operating room with us, and I expected actually to see all of the bone completely gone, and we'd be looking at his brain and the brain case. But fortunately for a bird, the middle layer of the bone of the skull is quite aerated. There's a real airspace there. So fortunately for him, the injury and the energy did not go completely through the bone. There was a little layer of bone that was covering the brain. So, he's an animal that we can rescue. So we drilled little holes in that bone to allow a little granulation tissue to grow through. And this is a standard plastic surgery maneuver. This is what I would do for a human. Granulation tissue grew through that bone over a period of 2 weeks, so we had a nice vascular base. And then Dr. Schrader harvested the full thickness skin graft from the bird's groin, which is nice fluffy brown feathers, some white, but mostly just fluffy brown. I prepared it, and then we put it on top of the eagle's head where that wound was, and it had contracted some. And then we put a tie-over dressing on because I had heard from Dr. Schrader that this bird does not like to be fooled with. It does not like dressings of any kind, so we did a minimal kind of dressing. Fortunately for us and the bird, he left that dressing alone for about a week. And then I got a text from Trent on a Thursday morning saying, well, the bad news is the eagle took the dressing off. The good news is it looked like the skin graft is alive. So I went down to take a look at him, or it. I think it's a...
We think it's a him.
Okay, we think it's a him. It's hard to check on an eagle. And the skin graft was there. It had a vascular supply. It looked like everything was going to be okay. So we took all the rest of the dressing off, and we just allowed him to have a little time in the cage, very quiet, so he didn't rub off the skin graft. And it has thrived. It's 100% take now, and it has nice little fluffy feathers growing from it. So he'll have the thermoregulatory mechanism to protect himself in the wild, and it looks like he's going to grow the big feathers as well. So if they look like the feathers that from the groin, all of them are pointed forward and are brown and fluffy, so when he flies, it'll be like a little brown mohawk that's on the top of his head. And I'm real pleased. The zoo has just done a marvelous job in taking care of this animal, and the technicians really need to be congratulated. Of course, Dr. Schrader and Dr. Armstrong are around all the time, but it's really the technicians who have done the work. So now he's ready. I think it's time to return him to raptor recovery, and see how well he flies. We have to remember now that this bird not only had lost the soft tissue and the bone on the top of his head, but he's been electrocuted. You know, he has suffered some electrical energy down through his body, either from the groin where the entrance site was and the exit site on his head. I mean, it would have had to have passed through his heart, so he would have been cardioverted, and it also probably passed through his brain as well. So now he's vigorous. He's an eagle again. He would take your finger off in a moment if you weren't quick enough. And we're going to take him back to raptor recovery and let him out in a flight cage and just see how he does. Resuscitate him, make sure that he's strong, able to catch his own food, and then hopefully, if he passes that next test, we'll be able to release him.
Now, I know you're a plastic surgery for humans. What kind of additional studying did it take for you to be able to do something like this on a bird?
Well, I didn't do any other studying. It just seemed like the right thing to do. I mean, healing is healing. Obviously, there are a lot of physiologic differences between birds and mammals, but that's exactly what I would do. In fact, do in Kenya. When I take my medical team to Kenya, we oftentimes see children who have fallen into the fire and they've burned off all of their scalp and they have this charred cranium looking at you, and you do the same thing. You debride the top surface and maybe even drill down into their brain cavity to allow the granulation tissue to grow through. So it seemed to me like it was going to be the same thing.
Now, are you open to working on more animals now that you got your first, I guess, taste of experience?
Of course. You know, the zoo is just a top-rate organization, and I would be thrilled to be allowed to help them. They know that I've offered, so I'm their soft tissue person.
So, is it safe to assume that the eagle is working, fulfilling expectations or exceeding expectations from maybe what you guys thought coming into the situation?
Exceeding expectations, absolutely. He has just been one lucky bird, one step at a time, and he's now ready to test him out on flight. If he can be eagle-ish, we'll let him go.
Will that testing happen at the recovery center?
At the Raptor Recovery Program. They have some flight cages there that are huge and made for birds of prey so that they can release them and let them really fly unimpeded and to build up their strength and to make sure their talons are in good position, to make sure that they can actually catch live animals. Because this animal was a wild bird. He was successful. I mean, he's a mature eagle. And we know he was capable of managing all of that on his own. So I think what we have to assess now is there any damage that we can't see to his brain or his heart? And the only way of knowing that is to let him in a flight cage and see how he does.
What kind of things could you do if he doesn't quite pass